Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And with the release of SOUEI, I kind of just wanted to make a video going over, what would be more worth it. Summoning on SOUEI or summoning for ELMESIA, who is still around from the previous meta, who is really good for this team. And SOUEI is also really good for this team. But they do have some pretty significant differences and necessities to make them work at full power. So, a lot of people are like, who do I use without ELMESIA? And now that SOUEI is out, like, who am I going to use without SOUEI? They're very powerful support options in their own right, and I kind of just want to go over their pros and cons so you guys can be a little bit more informed if you have neither and you really are looking for one. So this video is going to be pretty subjective. It's based on my own uses. I have ELMESIA, I have SOUEI. SOUEI Showcase should go up later today. Still working on that, but let's just start off with a few points about each of their banners specifically. So ELMESIA, being part of the previous month's meta, the Determination to Prosper, she is meant for that team to be at max power, but she still gets support. But her banner is honestly, it's hot dog shit. Hot dog shit. It's a single unit banner, which SOUEI is as well, so they both don't have a lot of super good value there. But this banner does not have any other featured EX characters. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 very, very old normal 5-star characters, which some of them have, well, actually, all of them have skill fusions of vastly varying degrees of usefulness. But there is no other EX character for ELMESIA's banner, which is not great. If you're going to summon on a single feature unit banner, there better be some other things that you can use here to actually make it worth your while if you don't actually pull ELMESIA. And while, like, Gazel is good because he's one of the big three for protection gauge on turn 1, Space Rimuru, if he's skill fused, can be a pretty decent support unit still. Trainee is a healer, and with her skill fusion, she can cut the ult damage you take down by 50%. Like, these are decent skill fusions, but you need them to be skill fused, which means you need them at level 100. And if that's not happening, they don't really have a lot. Gazel has the most usefulness after that. Being at 92, you get the full trait. But this banner is just not great. And then we go and look at SOUEI's banner, which is, again, still a single featured unit, so it's just the new SOUEI, but he does have 3 other EX characters with him. He's got Tempest Elite Benimaru, who is a pretty good unit for physical teams. We've got Idol Shuna, who, is okay. She's not the greatest thing in the world now, but she can be a halfway decent support. And she's a double alt swapper to green orbs. And then we've got Bride Shuna, who is still useful, but really only for her triple orb steal. So if you have like Summer Hinata, or you have the Wind Masked Hero from the Exalted Champions team, like you have a triple alt stealer already. You don't really need Shuna. But at least there are 3 other EX characters featured with SOUEI, which is a lot more than ELMESIA can say. And then we have, a list of 5 stars that are old as well, of varying degrees of usefulness. Maybe a little bit worse, but hey. As far as banner value is concerned, SOUEI's banner just has infinitely more value, having 3 other EX characters with him. All right, next up, talking about their actual kits. They're both EX characters, they're both magic focused, and they are dark and earth, which is a very weird spectrum of lots of units versus not a lot of units. Both AoEs, both support characters, they're meant to support other people, other teams, but how good are they at it? And you're going to look at this as objectively as possible. So SOUEI, he's lowering pierce resistance on his ult, which ult effects are just a little bit extra damage buff. I don't really look at those and be like, ooh, yeah, that's great. That's worth summoning for. None of them are that powerful, but it is nice that they have it. They both have the same effect, actually. Well, actually, no. He lowers pierce resistance, and ELMESIA lowers magic resistance, both by 15%. So you are getting, extra things out of it. Pierce resistance obviously means that you have to be piercing to begin with, while magic resistance means that you just need to be alting with a magic character to make, benefit off that. So SOUEI's alt skill is a little bit more limited because you do need something very specific. However, it can be magic, it can be physical. As long as you're piercing, you can make that work. SOUEI's first skill, magic character allies get a 70% attack buff. And then, that is limited to magic allies only. So no physical characters are going to get that. But there's a lot of magic characters out there. The second part is everybody, all allies, no matter what, get 50% synergy power. And if you use more than 300 skill points in a turn, it becomes 100% synergy power. And this is universal, right? It doesn't care if you're earth, fire, light, dark, physical, magic, ogre's pride, stern of spirit, exalted champions. You get 50% or 100% synergy power if you use 300 skill points, which he's meant to be used on a stacking team that has 300 skill points to use. Obviously, if you're running a burst team, they don't have 300. So you're never really going to see, you're just never going to see the extra 50% increase on this if you're using like Exalted Champion Velzard or New Year's Blessing Shion or something like that. But if you're running a magic team with Velzard, 70% attack right here and 50% synergy power, I mean, Exalted Champions is getting 70% attack from Exalted Champion Rimuru, who I hope nobody summoned for. And then Guy is getting 40% synergy power to them. Granted, that's two skills right there, and that's 80 points, right? For those two characters versus this one character who's doing both. It's just that you need someone to give synergy rate to your team before you can activate synergy power. So there is a restriction for only magic here. There's a restriction for needing a synergy unit to activate this synergy power. So there are some things there. Synergy is becoming a lot more common though, but there are stages that don't want synergy, right? They nerf synergy by 100%, and while if you max this out, it would match it, you're not really going to benefit out of that either. So you're going to end up just getting 70% attack buff for magic allies. So his second skill is a very odd convert, right? It changes any two orbs that are not blue to blues. So it could be, a green and an orange. It could be two oranges. It could be two greens. It doesn't work for alts. It doesn't work for rainbows because those are very special orbs that have their own kind of prerogative in the whole orb advancement chain. They don't count. Those are special things. They would, if they change it, they would be specifically called out in the skill. So it's only greens and oranges that are changed. But he can change any two colors, and it doesn't really matter, which is great. It makes him very, very useful for blue stacking teams that has 300 points that hopefully is running a synergy skill and maybe magic. So this is a very, very good skill for any magic synergy team that's blue stacking. And if we go look at ELMESIA, she also has, the equivalent of a 170% buff, just like SOUEI has at max power. She's just running different skills. So again, she is an AoE. She's lowering magic attack resistance by 15%, so a bit more generic than SOUEI. Her first skill, Earth and Fire characters solo combos damage by 70%. So if you're Earth or Fire, you get a 70% alt buff. If you're Dark, Light, Space, Wind, Water, you're shit out of luck. You're not getting that. So there is the restriction right there to two elements. And while Fire has been buffed the past 2 months, it's still not a super great element, and Earth is still kind of down in the dumps. ELMESIA is the best Earth character. So she's certainly buffing herself by quite a bit, right? Because she's going to get the 70. And then everybody gets 100% alt resistance down. So you see that, SOUEI is doing a 70% and up to 100. ELMESIA is doing a 70% and 100. So they are equivalent percentages, but buffing separate things. So Earth and Fire, heavy restriction. Not super great teams, but 70% is decent. and then 100% alt resistance down is the equivalent of another 100% alt buff. It's just stacking in a separate way. That way they can work together. And this is universal. So ELMESIA, while being limited to earth and fire for the full power, just helps everybody do more damage without needing, pierce or synergy or anything like that. So she does have some pros and she does have some cons, just like SOUEI does. So neither of them are 100% universal on their buff skill, right? Each of them has certain things you have to do to make full use of it. None of this can be sealed though, right? So you can go into a stage that doesn't want synergy or pierce or crit, and this skill is not affected because it's not buffing crit or pierce or synergy. It's buffing alts, which the enemy, they can nerf alt damage, sure, but that's not very common. And then they can't really do anything about alt resistance down. So while more limited, this is a bit more universal in that you can bring it anywhere that you really want to, where it's going to actually work at full power, versus SOUEI, where, he needs a character with synergy rate, and if the stage nerfs synergy power, it's really not yet that useful. So, okay. But her second skill increases earth and fire characters' max HP by 100%, and then enamors a single target, which gives you a free 15% alt gauge at the end of the turn. This max HP skill, only really useful if you're running healing characters, most likely Prosper Lumi. Otherwise, this part of the skill is absolute garbage. Only really useful for ranked Valor Cup at this point, because you get more HP and you can heal higher than your normal, and you can get a little bit higher remaining HP score. Sure. In normal events, I'm not using this skill in current beatdown battle. One, because they seal it, and two, just because I have another 100% HP cap doesn't mean I actually have another 100% HP. It just raises my total HP bar. So now it looks like I'm at half HP instead of full HP. This skill is actually kind of shit for most everyday play, and only really used by the sweaty tryhards in ranked Valor. The Enamor effect, 15% free alt gauge, is cool. It lasts for 2 turns, so you can get up to 30% free alt gauge with one use of this, but it is nowhere near as useful as SOUEI's Orb Change, just straight up. This is not as good as SOUEI's Orb Change in everyday gameplay. I'm not going to use this skill and suddenly be able to beat Conquest Millum or something, right? I'm not going to use this skill and I'm not suddenly able to beat Tempest or Tempered Edge EX5 Veldora, right? SOUEI's skill will help me do that because we're getting extra orbs and we're getting extra stacks. This doesn't do shit. So that is a huge black mark on ELMESIA right there. Her Valor trait, Protection Seal versus SOUEI's Attack Skill Seal. Protection Seal is, I think, much more useful than SOUEI's, because the attack skills, if you're using them, you probably don't really need it. Protection Seal can be very helpful, so this is a much better Valor trait. Her actual trait, 6 combo of blues, you get extra attack, and then for SOUEI, it's when you send 6 blues, he gets extra pierce power. So neither of those traits are really what I would call super game breaking, so not really, it's kind of a wash there. So overall, ELMESIA's big buff skill is a bit more universal, even though the actual alt buff itself is heavily limited to the 2 elements that are the worst off right now. And then her alt resistance down is good universal. SOUEI's magic attack, 70%, is very, very big because that's like half the game, if not more. And then 100% in synergy power is more total buff support damage than what ELMESIA will put out. If you're running a magic team that's synergy focused with both of these characters, the 100% buff and the 70% buff from SOUEI will eclipse what ELMESIA is doing. But if you're not on turn 8, or if you're not using 300 skill points, you're only at the 50%, ELMESIA's buff is better in that specific scenario. So they do have pros and cons. But as far as who's going to be more useful in later on content, I honestly kind of think that SOUEI is going to be more useful overall. A very generic orb change plus a magic buff, and it's not like we're lacking magic characters, and we're gonna get more of them. And synergy again is something that does get nerfed when teams don't want it, but it's still pretty impactful. And none of the early game stages nerf it because it didn't exist until the second anniversary. So all of Conquest, Conquest Prime, Chamber of well, most of the Chamber of Memories, Tempered Edge, they don't have any synergy resistance or debuffs or anything like that. So you can use it freely. The only things that nerf it are brand new stages that are meta specific and relevant. Meanwhile, ELMESIA, I mean, her buffs are you can use anywhere. But as far as future content and future usefulness, I do think SOUEI is going to win out because ELMESIA's second skill is just not that great. I mean, they've gone 2 months now of buffing fire and earth, or just fire really, and they're not going to keep doing that. So eventually, we're going to stop getting earth and fire characters for a good couple of months, and then her buff will be not nearly as impactful as it is like right stat now when we're nuking with Momiji, who happens to be fire, and then whatever the final DPS character for the Ogre's Pride team is, who's also going to be fire. Like ELMESIA is really good for her team. She's really good for the Ogre's Pride team. I don't know how good she is for another, like in 5 or 6 months from now, if we never get another Earth or Fire character. And that's, I think, what's going to hurt her the most, is because she's locked at full potential to that, we don't get them very often. So I think that SOUEI is a bit more worth it. His value has more banner. I think he will have more lasting potential value out of these two characters. And if you wanted to summon, because you didn't have either, I think SOUEI would be the better pickup. But, that's just going over their kits on paper. I've tested ELMESIA. She's been out for a while. I've kind of tested SOUEI. I'll need some more time before I'm really set on him. But right now, SOUEI is very powerful. ELMESIA is very powerful when you build a team around what she needs, but pretty much any support unit can be said that way. And any DPS can be said that way. If you buff any single character to the moon and back, they will look good. And you can certainly run ELMESIA and SOUEI together, like we're doing right now for the showcase. We're running, not that team, we're running this team, and we've got ELMESIA and we've got SOUEI, so we can buff the crap out of Momiji. This team is just full of 80-point skills, and it's kind of gross. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully, I don't know if this video made it more clear for you, but I tried to lay everything out as objectively as possible. Let me know if it worked for you, but that's it from me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.